All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are really delighted to offer this unique exclusive webcast with distinguished guests and panelists, hosted by Phil Clement, who's the founder of the Midwest Sustainability Network and the CEO of World Business Chicago. Really quickly, just about the Midwest Sustainability Network. We do believe that magic happens when we bring leaders across industries together to exchange ideas, build action plans, and then foster collaboration. If you're interested in the Midwest Sustainability Network, share it with your friends. We're building this, and we're really looking forward to the impact we all can have on our planet together. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Phil Clement.
Great, Tony Perishing Penguins Kempa. I really appreciate the introduction and your work that you put into this podcast. It's great to get everyone together. So thank you, everyone. We have a wonderful conversation here, and as Tony mentioned, this is all about the magic that comes together from collaboration. Our previous meetings had capital meeting, entrepreneurs meeting, big corporations, and our members of our city staff that had needs that needed to be met, and some really great solutions have come out of it. So in that tradition, I'm going to bring on our panelists. I'll start with Mr. Rainn Wilson. I believe what happens is our cameras go on, and then we can see folks. There he is. See, we're talking about magic, and there is Mr. Rainn Wilson. Thank you very much for joining us today, Rainn. Where are you today?
Nice try, Phil. You're not getting my home address. You know, ever since that restraining order. Hi, folks. I'm in a little town outside of Los Angeles at my home, and happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Phil.
Great to have you, Rainn. Gail Whiteman is an extraordinary activist working on the topic of sustainability. I got to know Gail a little bit through her involvement in the World Economic Forum. She's an outstanding leader on the topic. Gail, hello, welcome. Where are you calling in from?
Hey, Phil. Hi, Rainn. I am calling in from Rotterdam in the Netherlands.
Okay, Rotterdam. There we go. And we look forward to getting you going here on one of the most important topics in the world. So this is great. Alaina, hello. This is the recently appointed CEO of Current. Also a spin-off organization of World Business Chicago. So we're delighted to have been involved in the founding of this organization. Alaina, where are you joining us from?
Well, the middle of the lake. No, I'm actually in Montreal today for the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Governors and Cities meeting. And actually our mayor in Chicago is also here for his first international trip. So we'll be talking green-blue economy all week.
I love it. I love it. And thank you for doing that. I know the mayor is super excited about this opportunity. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about the conference. So I'm going to start out with Rainn because Rainn and I have known each other for a long time. I actually do have his home address, and I will not be advertising it today, but we go back to high school, and I think when I was, which is just hard to believe, right? But when I first started to work in sustainability realm, Rainn and I were talking, and he said, hey, you should come see me at the World Economic Forum because I'm doing this camping adventure there with Arctic Basecamp. So Rainn, could you give us a little bit of background? I think people are super familiar with you as an actor and you know, your talent as a writer. We'll talk about your book in a second too, but could you give us a little description of your climate activism and what that career has looked like, that part of your career has looked like?
Thanks, Phil. Actually, Phil's too humble to tell everyone, but I was cast in my first film at New Trier High School in Phil Clement's kind of post-apocalyptic adventure. I I was a mere background actor.
Oh, man.
Oh no, but there was the other film where I was an alien and I spoke. Two
You-
films I was in of Phil's.
You spoke beep.
That's right. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm really excited to have Dr. Gail Whiteman speak. She kind of brought me into this crazy world. Basically, what happened is, like so many of us, I was very concerned about climate change and climate issues. And other than sending out some angry tweets now and again to climate change deniers, I really wasn't doing anything. And I kind of thought, well, I have to do something. You know, I need to do more than just be a keyboard activist. And at that same time, a mutual friend of mine and Dr. Whiteman's said, just out of the blue, like just literally out of the blue, it's like, you know what? You really need to meet Gail. She's amazing. And I was like, okay. And then a week or two later, I was on a Zoom with Gail, and a couple of things happened. She's like, you need to come to the World Economic Forum in Davos and camp with us. I was like, excuse me, isn't that the place where you stay in 5-star hotels? She said, no, we have a model of an Arctic research facility, Basecamp, with geodesic dome tents on next to a hotel. And so I came there and did that. And it was a really interesting form of activism. We were on some panels. We work with Davos, not kind of against Davos, but at the same time, we seek to challenge the status quo and really, as Gail says, speak science to power. Speak science to power. And then shortly after that, we made a YouTube series with my company, Soul Pancake, called An Idiot's Guide to Climate Change. She was, Gail is such a go-getter. She was like, come on, let's go to Greenland and talk to scientists and view the impact of climate change firsthand with the melting glaciers. And so we were off and running, and we'll go into some of our campaigns, some of our activations. We're kind of coming at, there's many ways, Phil, and all of you CMOs, sustainability folks, there's many ways to tackle this problem. There's a lot of different facets, a lot of different tentacles on the octopus. But what we seek to do is kind of climate communication, both at the highest levels of power and also for a mass audience.
Fantastic. And a great segue into Gail. Maybe you could give us a sense of how you started out in this topic. Have you always been a climate activist? What's your background? What brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, I'm muted. The faux
No,
pas.
you're good now.
No, I'm okay. No, I'm good.
Yeah.
So I would say that I'm a climate scientist, not a climate activist. I am a professor of sustainability at a UK university. But before I became an academic, I actually worked in marketing and advertising with fast-moving consumer packaged goods and many other brands and companies. And I left that because I was really intrigued about the environmental problems that I could see we were facing. I'm Canadian originally, from the Great Lakes, Lake Ontario, Alaina. And it became really clear that once I started talking to science and talking to the boardroom, that there was a big disconnect between the reality of science and the measurements, observations, as well as the projections, and really what different audiences believed or knew or understood. And I saw that just using my old consumer packaged goods background, like we have to figure out a scientist who is our target audience, and then we need to talk to them and meet them for where they are and where we think they should go. So as a Canadian, I'd done my PhD in the subarctic, and I'd done a number of different scientific trips. And one year through the Northwest Passage, it became really clear in 2010 that there just was nowhere near as much ice as there should have been. And we know that's bad news for the polar bear, but according to the natural scientists, clearly bad news for the rest of humanity. And I said, the groups that the big companies I'm talking to, I'm a business school professor, and the World Economic Forum, which I'm talking to, they know about climate, but they are not paying attention to what's happening in the Arctic. So I said, well, we have to go. We have to go to Davos, and we have to go big or go home. And we couldn't afford Davos, I have to be frank with you. So I said, let's bring a tent. And a few years later, took a while. It's not easy to get a spot, even for a tent at Davos. We went in 2017, and it was, sort of rearing right from then. We were very, very lucky to have Vice President Gore as our keynote that year, along with Christiana Figueres. We've had Rainn camp with us. We've had Greta Thunberg camp with us. We've had many other celebrities, and we've worked extensively and very closely with the World Economic Forum to change a lot of the narratives that's gone on. So it's sort of that trajectory since the early days.
Amazing, amazing. And thank you for that. I think what we'll do is circle back to that activism or that science and the fact-based conversation you're having with the world on climate change. And then, Alaina, why don't you give us a little background on how you ended up working and what your mission is at this moment in time?
So I also grew up in the Great Lakes, in and around Chicago, and I think water has it's like a natural, there's a magical attractive force that it has. It's also a sort of level playing field. Like everybody that sees it kind of, I think, has some kind of intrinsic response to it. And that certainly happened for me, grew up playing in the Great Lakes, just has always been a nurturing, sustaining source for me. But most of my career has been in economic development, thinking about how we create more opportunity for people and places and cities. But I got into work in cities because I really believe that we have to get it right in cities if we want to get it right for the planet. It's the place that we have to think about how to build more sustainably, more humanely. And so right around the time that I had the opportunity to come lead Current, I'd really been trying to wake up every day thinking more about the environment. I'd spent a lot of time thinking about the people side, the business side, and Current really, our nonprofit is all about linking economic opportunity and environmental sustainability. Often environmental injustice and economic injustice kind of run hand in hand. It affects the same people, the same places. We see that with climate, but it can create the reverse. It can create the opportunity to grow. And so Current is all about spurring the innovative research and development and businesses really, and that will create jobs and wealth building opportunities here in the Great Lakes, but also, we have an ambition to sort of change the way the world manages water. And I'm really excited about that. I think that opportunity frame paired with water, which is again, it has that great natural convening force. It's a really powerful opportunity to get a lot of coalition building happening around water, and then by extension, on broader climate issues.
Also amazing. So I think one of the great things about this conversation is, Alaina, you're in Chicago, generally speaking, and you're headquartered here, right on the shore of 84% of the world's the country's fresh water, and the single largest source of fresh water. And I think we're thinking about that topic every day in Chicago, including at the conference you're at now. Gail is going to be joining us in the fall, so just start to noodle this team. She will be doing a workshop with us and our members, and particularly people in the corporate community or head sustainability officers that are looking at how to highlight and bring sustainability issues to the board and have really constructive conversations at the board level. And then Rainn is a Chicago native. I mean, not a native. He's a native of many places. Like Einstein, you are claimed by many, but we certainly enjoyed having you here during your high school years, and we'll get back to that. I always have these images of Rainn when he was in high school being the night watchman at the Baha'i temple, which is just a fun thing to think about. But Rainn, why don't we come back to just talking about your engagement and what you learned there at WEF when you were there and you started to speak with, I guess, both activists and the business community about sustainability. Were there any kind of immediate reactions you had to where the dialogue was?
Well, like I said, the the focus of Arctic Basecamp, Gail's nonprofit organization, which really is an international organization. It operates not only in the United States and in the UK, but also in the Netherlands and across Europe, was speaking science to power. And Gail has a very strong clarion call about how our other catchphrase, you'd appreciate this, Phil, is what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. For many years, there were many warning signs and red flags going up from the Arctic regions that people were like, oh, well, that's just the Arctic. But now, we're in danger of losing, the Gulf Stream and seeing how, glacial melt. There's so many different issues of what happens up there affects us in the more temperate regions. So I was happy. I was mostly early on just in a kind of a learning mode.
Yep.
And I found actually it's interesting because among my set, there is a kind of an idea that WEF and Davos is it's kind of almost conspiratorial, and that it's these billionaires flying in and eating canapes and not doing anything and kind of like making decisions in boardrooms that don't affect us. But it actually is very important for a very important locus for government, nonprofit, and business to be discussing big global issues. That discussion has to be happening. It's better to be happening in person. It's got to happen somewhere. Why not Switzerland? You can pick up a Rolex while you're there. So I actually saw a lot of interesting progress being made. When you have, like Mark Benioff of Salesforce talking to someone at the UN and then talking to Jane Goodall and making, sweeping commitments to sustainability on a much larger level, prompted by other businesses. And I found that to be very interesting and useful. There's a long, long, long way to go. Yeah. This is not something that I would agree with. Adam McKay and Yellow Dot would not agree with me on that part of the conversation, although we're very aligned with Yellow Dot, and I know we're going to get to them in a little bit. But the thing, Phil, I'm going to just preempt you a little bit as MC, because I want to throw to Gail and have her go through some of our campaigns that we did, because what we realized is, hey, we're doing these activations that are very effective. For instance, we had one called Bottled Warning. So we went to COP. Which COP was it, Gail?
26 in Glasgow.
26, and we imported an iceberg, and we hung it up outside the event hall. And we were bottling the water and handing out glacial melt water. So as people were walking in, they were seeing this melting iceberg. And now, what good does that do specifically in terms of like legislation? Well, zero, but it has an emotional effect, and it creates a memory and a profound, distinct visual idea of what's going on. And we realized that those kind of activations is what we were best at as an organization. So we oh, my phone is going off. That's terrible. We shifted to this other organization, our sister organization, Climate Basecamp, and decided we needed to do more activations to reach a mass audience, and in the doing, do a different kind of climate communication. We all know what it's like, and you click on an article and it gives you all these data points, and it's like even someone who's actively involved in climate stuff, I can't even read those articles. I can't even look at that science. I want another way in. So we were doing more kind of activations around climate for a larger audience. But Gail, do you want to talk just a little bit about some of those
Sure.
some of those campaigns that we did, like what we learned at Davos on how to message things and take them to a larger audience?
Yeah, thanks, Rainn. And to your credit, you have been there with us for so much of the journey, including sleeping. He's being modest. When Rainn camped with us in Davos, it was, I don't know, minus 20 Celsius. Apologies, I'm Canadian. I can't remember how to get that back to Fahrenheit, but that's pretty darn cold. And
Cold.
cold, that'd be cold. And no complaints from Mr. Lynn. And it was his birthday, so he was not being a princess at all. So I think that if we look at the target audience of Davos, of people with power, I think what we need to do, first of all, is we need to grab their attention. So we need to do things differently, and we need to do it in a way with a group of people that have seen like literally everything. And we do not have a budget of like Zuckerberg or Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or all these things. And they have all these really ritzy things. So we just rocked up. The first thing really was the Arctic Basecamp tent, and we all camped in it. And it was very cold, and like literally nobody was camping. So everybody wanted to come. And we now have a regular roster of VIP super elite people asking us, can they please camp with us? And occasionally we do, if we think that they work in an area and they're, not just looking for an experience, but are supportive of it. But I think the real part with Davos is to talk about how the Arctic is going to drive global risks. So the first part of the messaging campaign that we did was we really looked at the global risks that the World Economic Forum and their constituents are interested in, things like extreme weather. And then what we did was we explained why Arctic change is actually a major driver of extreme weather. And it is, and it will only get worse in terms of wildfires, which we saw last summer in Canada coming down, of course, the smoke into the northern US, but also California wildfires are related to Arctic change. We see polar vortex in Texas. Yeah, that's a little bit more obvious because it says polar in the phrase of the extreme weather, but it could be droughts, it's the hurricanes, it's the cyclones, it's all around. So that also means threats to food and water. And of course, Davos has a lot of agricultural companies, but also a lot of heads of state that do not want their country to not have food. So the whole point about really looking at the global risks that this group cared about, and then really saying, okay, let's deconstruct the root causes of that. And that would be one way of actually, I think, really trying to galvanize and accelerate climate action. But on top of that, we said, and a theory of change, which we were learning as we were going, I'll be honest, right? A theory of change, it can't just be the people elite at Davos, right? We got to hit at them on an ongoing basis. And we did that in a few different ways. The first way we did that was by curating an online platform called the Global Climate Risk Platform, where we have different target audiences, business, policy, media, citizens, and other scientists, curating the science and talking the language that they could understand. We have an AI generated tool that also helps curate all the news stories on a daily basis around extreme weather events. So you can go on this globe, and we can put the link in the chat, and you can literally see in the news what's going on, and it's automatically translated from 100 different languages. And that's just a prototype. So we're starting in this space. But then, because Rainn and I were working together, we realized that the power of using celebrity is huge. And it's not just huge because it's really fun to work and be with Rainn, which it was, the Greenland trip, still a highlight of my life. My kids can't believe it. Is actually about talking to audiences that are not engaged in this area. So like the movable middle and Gen Z, a lot of Office fans are really young, right? They're not actually have probably ever been in an office like how I would have grown up with, So Rainn he can reach across political spectrums. He just reaches that movable middle in a way that he can communicate climate science and engage with others. So for example, Billie Eilish and Phineas, Rainn reached out to them. They did stuff with us on a video jam series that we did alongside the World Economic Forum called Make Earth Cool Again. We brought in Robert Downey Jr. So again, bringing in different audience musicians, and then and other comedians and so on, trying to get that message to people that are not already inundated, because the people that already have bought in, they bought in, right? So what we need to do is reach other things. Yes, we brought the iceberg from Greenland to Glasgow, and we had global media coverage. So that was good. Best WhatsApp I ever got was the iceberg has cleared customs, because that was not easy. And a major UK supermarket chain agreed to pick it up in a freezer truck, because we didn't know what to do with it. I just said, ship it, let's figure it out. And that all worked out really well. But then we realized, and I think this was the biggest one, was when the idea came up that during midterm elections in 2020, was it 2022, I think, Rainn, where you changed your name, right? Maybe I don't want to toss back to you, but
Yeah.
that, and then we realized, we should be talking just also to people. The Davos elite is still really important, but how do we actually talk to people in that movable middle, which is where Climate Basecamp came from.
Amazing. And Gail, what do you remember what you changed your name to?
Oh my God, I've never changed it back. It's Gail Uncontrollable Wildfires Whiteman. I think it totally works. My family says that's a keeper. So Alaina, you got to change yours
Rainn
too.
Extreme Weather. I can't remember my name.
Winter Wilson.
Extreme Weather Winter Wilson. So what that is specifically is we've done some online campaigns and activations. One is a science-based one called arcticrisk.org. I put it in the chat. I don't know if people can see it. But then part of that was an app called Arctic Risk Name Changer app. And we had a campaign to get people to change their names. And we got hundreds of thousands of people to change their names and change it on their social media with this kind of like word scrambler, random word generator about all of the issues around Arctic risk. And again, like, did it change policy or provide legislation? No. Did it get, tens or hundreds of thousands of people engaging in a fun, unique, memorable way around climate ideas and issues? Absolutely it did. It was front page on all the people in Yahoo
everywhere.
and
Wall
everywhere.
Street Journal, Forbes. It was
Wall Street. Yeah, I was
USA
I
Today.
was
It was
You were
everywhere.
Fox News too.
Yeah.
I was feted on many sites and lambasted on many more conservative news sites that shall remain nameless, and that's okay. It got people to engage, and those are the kinds of we call them activations that we want to continue to do, even with our somewhat limited resources.
I just ran the generator. I got Alaina, city's too hot, Harkness. So that's what it told me.
Nicely
That's
done.
perfect.
And it's true.
Go ahead and rename myself. Great. In the chat.
In those of us who are working in policy and start to look at issues that are, really requiring change, often start to talk about the thinking fast and slow of the general population, right? And so when you look at why people think there's crime in a city, for example, there's a thinking fast and then there's a thinking slow version of that story. And I think what you're saying is that there's so many well-intentioned people out there. You go to something like World Economic Forum, and you do find well-intentioned, hardworking people. The pace of play is just too slow because the crisis is moving so rapidly, right? When it comes to sustainability. And so like, how are we going to kick up that gear? And I think these emotional experiences that you're talking about move thinking about climate change from kind of the slow thinking to just a quick thought, right? Well, I've got to do more. We got to do more. The moment for change was a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and we're just not there. And I think that this is one of the things we have to highlight as professionals looking to create change. There's also an opportunity in this. I think if you realize any sort of economic trend that is creating major change also creates economic opportunity. And I think the city of Chicago, for example, is trying to highlight that to entrepreneurs and to folks who may be involved in anything from water to sustainable efforts to better, healthier food, which I think these things are all really linked. Alaina, would you like to share a little bit about your organization's mission and how it came out of the city and what you're up to right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's a perfect tie. And I know there've been some questions in the chat about moving from communication to commitments, and being here in Montreal with a lot of mayors and local leaders who are all working together to create commitments jointly to both protect this globally significant Great Lakes resource that we have, but also think about how to utilize it wisely to create economic opportunity. I mean, that's the whole mission of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. And it's really great that we have electeds here on the ground working to make those commitments and flesh them out, hammer them out together. So I'm just excited to be here. And I think World Business Chicago created Current because there was this massive opportunity kind of hidden in plain sight in the city. Phil, you talked about the abundance of fresh water that's kind of in our back or front yard, depending on where you live. And you know, that is something that we take for granted, and we don't use it the way that we could. And I think we've been kind of missing the opportunity. I love this conversation about like what connects with real people, like what are the really powerful images that can help us understand that change is coming. And I can tell you, I started at Current 4.5 years ago. And at that time, if you pitched to a company that the Great Lakes would be a place where, you know, climate resilience would be important, and that water sustainability and availability is going to be a reason you might want to locate your water intensive industry there and maybe move your family, that was a non-starter. But since then, we've had the Colorado River Basin, we've had the bathtub ring, right? Like that, everybody kind of saw, right? Like we have the potential to actually have Deadpool in Lake Mead. That's a crazy thought. Like we hadn't ever contemplated that before, right? We had these droughts, wildfires. Anyway, the conversation's changed, and that's not good, but it has opened opportunities up to talk with others about what we can do to get ahead of a future where the Great Lakes are going to be a place we need to be carefully thinking about climate migration and what its impact's going to be. So, I mean, from my perspective, what Current's out to do is drive innovation, not only with technology, but with the kinds of policies that we need to start using our water more responsibly, think about recycling and reusing our wastewater. The initiative that I am showing here, wrong part, Great Lakes Renew. This is our recently announced National Science Foundation backed regional innovation engine effort. It's great because they've recognized the importance of having a circular water economy initiative anchored here in the Great Lakes. And the whole job is to figure out how we create the novel solutions that are going to pull all the bad stuff out of our water and also recover the things that we're sending downstream, flushing down the toilet, wasting. And those, like, I think surprising many people, that includes nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, things that are in super short supply in the environment, but are really valuable for fertilizers, for one thing. So how do we recover those and not send them away? How do we recover critical minerals like lithium, nickel, cobalt, the things that we need to use to make all the things that are going to power the clean energy future we need? EVs, batteries, all of that. We're losing that in our wastewater. So it's this powerful resource recovery agenda. And, you know, that's what Current is set up to do, is to like create the cross-sector networks of researchers, industry partners, innovators and technology, you know, problem solvers, and really come together and build the engine that's going to power that new future. But we need to be reaching a broader public, and it's really important that we're sharp communicators about the importance of this mission, because today, you know, we look out our back or front yard and all we see is abundant water, but it's not infinite, and we can't treat it that way.
Well, we were delighted when Brandon Johnson decided to spend his 1-year anniversary in office there with you. We thought that was a sign of a significant achievement. And then, you know, I think if I even go back to Daley, he used to talk about just how practical mayors are, right? You could take mayors from warring nations, put them in a room, and they'd start talking about garbage collection and feeding and getting people off the streets. And so these are the, you know, these are the practical problem solvers, you know, that we have in government, and they're sitting there on, you know, one of the greatest assets that we got to protect. So that's just amazing. So Rainn and Gail, what's next in your adventure and your communication work?
Gail, go ahead.
Okay, Doke. Well, I'll do an intro and then I'm going to toss to you. You do it so well. So we've done all this great work with Arctic Basecamp, and really, again, our theory of change has been emergent. And although historically I have marketing background, we're really small and we're just trying to do our best. So if people have got great ideas, please send them over either through you or through Tony or however. So we're definitely crowdsourcing help on that. But when we could see that, really, I think the big pull that how Rainn could reach other audiences, and we felt that was so important. We together, Rainn and I together with US comedy writer Chuck Tatham, so that's like Modern Family, Arrested Development, and How I Met Your Mother, so big shows. We decided that we would set up Climate Basecamp with a mission to speak science to culture. And that, I think, gives me so much energy, renewed energy, because it's talking to the general public. And we know these very important years in many countries around the world. And we've decided that we have two main campaign themes, and I'm going to introduce those, but maybe Rainn, you can then talk about them and what you think of them. The first one is, if we want to talk to people, so normal people, about climate change, if I talk like a scientist, everybody turns off. They're busy, it's scary, they don't know what to do, and they don't want to change, right? Nobody wants to change if you've got quite a good life. You want to change if your life's not so great, but if it's okay, you don't want to change. But we know that all the things that people love are actually endangered because of climate change. So our first bucket or theme, communication theme, is save the things we love. And that could be all kinds of things. That could be chocolate, that could be ice cream, that could be wine, that could be soccer pitches, that could be ice hockey rinks outside, that could be holidays, that could be all kinds of things. Save the things we love. And we're starting to look at how we would enact those. And the second one really speaks to this idea of, and the questions in the chat a little bit were about this, is things happening fast enough. So dealing with climate anxiety or climate apathy. And we decided, and actually it came for me when I was in Dubai at the last UN meeting, and where I started to feel hopeless. And I don't normally feel that way. I know it's a very difficult situation environmentally and geopolitically, but I feel usually glasses half full. But I was really kind of sinking in Dubai in more ways than one. And I thought, well, hope is not an imaginary idea. It's not naive. It's not a daydream. And I thought it can only come from action. So we decided that what we would do is put together a campaign with the performing arts sector, where we would put on performances of hope for things like the glaciers or inner city nature or garbage patches. And then that's what we're looking at doing. And we kicked that off at Davos, again, in a high-end area, only because of Davos, using cello and outdoor ballet in front of the Alps. And it was so emotional. We all cried, we all felt renewed. So we went on that arc of scared, doom and gloom, and then up and down, and the catharsis gave us all energy back. So this idea of performing hope as a manifesto is the second campaign. So save the things you love, and here's
Love
hope.
it. Love it.
Yeah, those are great. I think that Gail is right. We had recently a viral video called Save the Flavors. That's part of like Save the Things We Love. And it's talking about how chocolate is endangered, and chocolate prices have like doubled in the last couple of years because a lot of drought and disease from climate change globally, and reduced areas where one can grow chocolate and cocoa for that matter. And then people also need hope, and they need to believe that change is possible. I think that cynicism and pessimism about the possibilities of change just makes you not want to change even more. And so we have to kind of open people's hearts to that. Can I talk about the soul boom?
I was actually going to ask you about that because, I know, and I think it's super fascinating for people that are in this work. What is that deeper sense of reward we can get from being engaged in sustainability? And your book, Soul Boom, and your podcast is really catching a lot of momentum and interest. So, yeah, please give us more.
Well, one thing a lot of people don't know about me is that I kind of have a secret inner Oprah Winfrey. And I'm very interested in spirituality, not just on a personal level, but how do we take the ideas in all of the world's great faith traditions and those key wisdom components of faith traditions, and use those as tools to help us as a species move forward. And that's kind of the thesis of Soul Boom, why we need a spiritual revolution. And one of the things I talk about a lot in there is climate change, because you can look at climate change very simply as like, hey, we need to limit CO2 and we need to pass legislation around that. And that's important, super important. But we're not addressing the underlying issue. The underlying issue is humanity's kind of distorted and kind of toxic relationship to planet Earth, where we use it as an endless reservoir that we can just endlessly suck resources from, and that we can endlessly spew the refuse back into. And as long as we have that kind of relationship with Mother Earth, at risk of sounding like a hippie, it doesn't matter if we limit, CO2 emissions or methane emissions. We're gonna bump up against other issues around climate change and environmental sustainability in a larger picture. So we have to completely culturally start to reframe our relationship to the planet. And that sounds kind of vast, but it's doable, it's important. We can do that with younger generations. And we need to kind of rethink a lot about how we do business. Is quarter by quarter nonstop profit and endless kind of easy consumerism, the answer toward, living a better life and living a more harmonious life with our planet. So there's a lot of like deeper philosophical kind of conversations and thinking that need to happen. So the Soul Boom, podcast is trying to dig a little bit deeper into the human experience, especially as related to nature and our interactions with each other.
I love that. I'm actually reading, I don't know if you've read Karen Armstrong's book, Sacred Nature. It came out in so it just really resonates. I'm reading it right now. But what you realize digging into the sort of spirituality connection to nature is just how long-term, like for most of civilization, that's how we've treated it, as if there was like a completely organic, natural connection between the natural world and our vitality, our ability to live. And it's just only recently, right, that we've had this frame of sort of breaking that mold. And I think it maybe sounds heady, but it's like actually a very concrete sort of path back to it when you realize, like, on a day-to-day basis, all the things we love, so many of the things we love are contingent on a healthy natural world, so I love that. I haven't listened to the podcast. I can't wait.
And listen, this, I imagine there's a lot of eye rolls from the 69 participants around these topics, but we all have a role to play in healing our planet. And whether that's making small adjustments at your company, whether it's getting involved in your neighborhood and community, whether it's giving financial support to organizations like Climate Basecamp and Arctic Basecamp or the Sierra Club or whatever, climate or nature or environment nonprofit, whether it's educating your kids, whether it's helping to pass legislation on a larger level, whether it's being an entrepreneur and seeking technological solutions to what's happening in our atmosphere. There's lots of different ways. We need lots of different kinds of cooks in the oven to be addressing this. So we don't have to be bickering over like which one is better. We have to do them all. It's all hands on deck. Change your business, develop new technologies, clean up, lakes and the environment, educate young people on what's going on, build hope, broadcast these ideas to a mass audience, or speak science and truth to power if you're in that arena. There's lots of different ways to pitch in on the in this climate emergency.
Thank you, Rainn. I mean, I think that the observation that this is certainly a spiritual challenge for many. The health implications of having a healthy planet are absolutely clear. At the same time, from an economic development perspective, I loved one of the opening commentators when Biden was elected and had a Congress on this topic. She opened up with a comment, there's no great jobs on a dead planet. And, but at the same time, economic upheaval and change creates tremendous opportunity. And folks that are thinking, that are entrepreneurs, there are resources in the city of Chicago. There's resources that we're looking to bring forward to help people do new things that are needed. So we're just, delighted to have people joining that conversation. We're probably getting close to winding up a bit, but Gail, I wanted to swing back. I know that we're thinking about bringing a group together to talk about how they can bring this conversation to the board the most effectively. Would you like to give us any preview to that topic, or how we might think about approaching it in the interim?
And Gail, I just want to add to that, because one of the things Gail has great expertise is she's worked with governmental organizations and large corporations on this. So when you have a group of people, of business leaders, thinking about the economics of sustainability, what's your central message?
She's a corporate whisperer.
Oh my God, you guys, the bar is too big. Like that's like, let's bring it down. Let's bring it down. If I'm going to do the workshop, let's just hope there's maybe some small amount of content. I think the first thing is like with any target audience, what do they care about? And what do they not just care about because they're a board member of XYZ Corporation? Who are they? Who's their family? Where are they from? Where do they live? And then really doing that due diligence, especially at the board level, to figure out climate's going to affect all those things. So in a sense, what things do they love? What things do they care about? As well as always coming in, especially at a board level, of here's the material financial risks now and in the future. And an anecdote for that is my team has been asked in the past for a very large food company to come in and actually explain to them where their risks were on the value chain at various different climate scenarios above tipping points. And, there's people in the organization that would have had the answer to that. We didn't even do new science, but what we did was we summarized and communicated that science sufficiently that the board signed on to a net zero pledge really close after that, because they thought we actually have to. It's not about just reducing our own emissions. If the rest of the world doesn't do it, we're picking up the price tag ourselves. So that idea, I think, is a way of playing with it, but always going into the hearts and the minds as well. There's no question of that, this emotional connection. And if they have, for example, like they actually like that little AI globe where they're like, okay, well, this is where I'm from and I want to see the stories on this. And it brings it in. Today, I was teaching exec ed and I had one guy that was, from Houston, and he's like, yeah, I spent like all this time on this thing looking at what the news was on Galveston on these things. And he said he learned about his own city by just looking at the news that we had curated. So for me, I think it is about combining all those storylines and then giving them hope that they can actually do things. The bottom line is, for any board or any group of executives, I say, it's about courage. Do you have courage or don't you have courage? And are you gonna courage up or are you gonna courage down? And I think that is the moment. And that's the reality check. It's not about hiding our heads in the sand or doing little bits, incremental change. I mean, we're so close to the edge of these tipping points. We need bold action and we need courageous action. And which side of that card are you going to stand on?
Yeah, fantastic. Alaina, would you like to?
Yeah, it's courage. It's also, we've just launched an industry consortium for Current and for Great Lakes Renew that's really trying to bring water stewards, and they're not always the companies that you think of as being in what we call the blue economy, but they use a lot of water and they're really conscious of how that has to change and also how much that affects the bottom line of the business, right? So I think it's really important to be both courageous, forward thinking, and also find these places where more sustainable practices are just so related to the bottom line of the company. And there's many of them. It just takes some creativity and people that are willing to really, look under the hood and get beyond the sort of obvious commitments. So I think we're really excited about that momentum. And again, it's the work of trying to explain where this hidden water resource is throughout supply chains. It's hidden all over the place. And we need to do that work. But then I think once we do, we're seeing that there's increased interest in coming to the table and thinking about the role that water plays in our climate future is not just about the water we're drinking or the ecosystems that depend on it, but water is so related to our energy costs. It's very heavy to heat, treat, move. So it's a critical part of this climate story. And of course, it also makes the glaciers and icebergs that we can, so such an important part of keeping our planet's heating and cooling system intact. So
there we go. Well, thank you, and good luck in Montreal, and thank you for working with the mayors. We wish you best of luck there. And Rainn, any closing thoughts or comments?
No, thanks, Phil, and the whole organization, the sustainability organization, for just having these conversations and these dialogues. They're just really important, And how do you move? There's three key elements in human behavior: knowledge, volition, and action. So you have to have the knowledge, which a lot of knowledge is out there about climate and what needs to be done. And this kind of speaks to Gail's courage thing. We kind of know what the action is. It's, we're going to have to belt tighten. We're going to maybe have to reduce some of our profit in order to do this, to be thinking long term, to be thinking like 10, 20, 50 years down into the future. That's going to be difficult. That's going to have some real difficult conversations with the board and the shareholders, et cetera. And there's resistance to that. What's in the middle? So we've got knowledge and we've got action. What's in the middle? It's volition. It's will. It's that act of like, I've got this knowledge. What makes me harness that into action?
Yeah.
And that's that beautiful little impulse that, like Gail said, not having your head in the sand, not in denial about what's going on, but having the courage to change what you can in your small sphere, whether it's as an individual, as a family, as a cul-de-sac, as a church, as a school, as a small business owner, as a large business consortium. So these conversations hopefully can be also aimed at that little middle section of like, what gives us courage? What lends that little spark toward action?
yeah.
Great. Unbelievable. Thank you. I mean, I think that notion of just a gut reaction to do more and to do it quickly is something that we need to impose upon the populace, right? And work to create. So, hey, Tony, I think you probably want to close us out with letting us know about follow-up from this session. It's great to have these conversations. We want to have inspirational conversations about how we can change the world, but also some practical resources for folks and knowledge about what's going on. So we look forward to continuing the dialogue here in the Midwest on what we can be doing in sustainability. But over to you for any closing comments here on instructions, et cetera. Housekeeping.
Thank you so much, Phil, and thank you to everyone, Rainn, Gail, and Alaina. This has been really an amazing hour. I hope everyone who's joined us live has really appreciated and enjoyed this and has a couple of key takeaways where you can then take this out to the world in action. There are a few questions that are still open, and our goal is to take a look at these questions and provide a follow-up summary back to everybody who attended. So look for that in your email box in the near future. But we want to just thank you all for your engagement, for taking your time out today to join us. And we look forward to the next events that we will be sponsoring with our very generous sponsors and partners throughout the industry. And thank you so much.
Okay, and looking forward to fall. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody, for your great work.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.